right, everyone, we're going to get started. So once again, for those who are just joining, good morning. I'm Genevieve with MyCop. I'm going to be passing it on to our interpreters because we are going to be operating in a multilingual space. And so that everyone has the instructions on how to access this meeting in the language they're most comfortable with. So, buenos días. Voy a pasar a nuestros intérpretes, Naira y María. Esto sería un espacio multilingüe y los intérpretes nos van a dar instrucciones para que podamos accesar a la junta en el idioma que estamos más cómodas.
Hola, buenos días a todos. Mi nombre es Naira Pacheco y mi co-intérprete es María Lozano.
Hi, my name is Maria and my co-interpreter is Naira Pacheco.
El Consejo Comunitario del Medio Ambiente mantiene un compromiso fuerte a la creación de espacios de justicia del lenguaje. Por este motivo, esta presentación se llevará a cabo en español y el webinario será interpretado simultáneamente en inglés y español. Así que favor de escuchar y hablar en el idioma que se sienta más cómodo. Al usar esta función, esperamos crear un espacio de justicia del lenguaje más inclusivo que pueda informar nuestro trabajo más allá de este espacio y nos ayude a desmantelar dinámicas de poder con respecto al lenguaje.
The Community Environmental Council has a strong commitment to creating language justice spaces. For this reason, this presentation will be held in Spanish and the webinar will be interpreted simultaneously in English and Spanish. So please listen and speak in the language you are most comfortable. In using this function, we hope to create a more inclusive language justice space that can inform our work outside of this space and better help us break down power dynamics in regards to language.
Para poder usar la función de interpretación, usted tiene que descargar la última versión de la aplicación de Zoom, ya sea en su celular o computadora, para que pueda escuchar la interpretación. Si no la tiene, por favor, vaya al sitio web de Zoom que hemos enviado en el chat.
In order to be able to use the interpretation function, you must download the latest version of the Zoom app, either on your phone or your computer, so that you can hear the interpretation. If you do not, please go to the Zoom website we have shared on the chat.
Los espacios multilingües se crean en colectivo. A continuación, unos acuerdos para apoyar la justicia del lenguaje en este webinario.
Multilingual spaces are created collectively, so we will go over some guidelines to help support language justice in this webinar/meeting.
Favor de solo hablar una persona a la vez para que las intérpretes puedan captar todo lo que dice.
Please speak one person at a time so that the interpreters can capture everything you say.
Les pedimos a todos que hablen en un paso lento y moderado, especialmente cuando están leyendo algo, ya que tendemos a hablar hasta más rápido cuando leemos.
We ask everyone to speak at a moderate pace, especially for presenters, when reading aloud, as we tend to speak even faster when reading.
Mantengan sus micrófonos en mudo cuando no esté hablando para evitar ruido de fondo.
Please keep your microphone on mute when you are not speaking to avoid background noise.
Puede escribir sus preguntas en el chat en el idioma de su preferencia o hablar en voz alta si hay espacio para preguntas y respuestas.
You can write your questions in the chat in the language of your choice or speak up if there's space during the question and answer portion.
Si usted es bilingüe, favor de no cambiar de idioma en la misma oración y asegúrese de hablar en el canal de idioma adecuado para asegurar que lo que diga se escuche o interprete o haga clic en audio original.
If you are bilingual, please do not switch back and forth languages in the same sentence and make sure to speak in the appropriate language channel to ensure you are heard or interpreted or choose your original audio.
Se da la bienvenida a contribuciones del grupo entero.
Contributions from this entire group are welcome.
En un minuto, cuando terminemos de dar las instrucciones, activaremos la función de interpretación. Si usted está en su computadora, verá aparecer un globo en la parte de abajo de su pantalla. Si está en su teléfono, va a haber 3 puntos en la parte de abajo al lado derecho. Haga clic en estos y seleccione el idioma que habla. Si por algún motivo el audio original suena más fuerte que la voz del intérprete, en cualquier momento puede silenciar el audio original.
In just a minute after I finish up giving the instructions, we will activate the interpretation feature. If you're on a computer, you will see a globe pop up on the bottom of the screen. If you're on your phone, you will see 3 dots on the bottom, right-hand side of your screen. Click on these and select the language you speak. If for some reason the original speaker sounds louder than the interpreter you're listening to, you can mute the original audio at any moment.
Creamos estos espacios con el apoyo de todos. Favor de comunicar cualquier problema en el chat.
We create these spaces with everyone's support. Please communicate any issues by using the chat function.
Gracias. Ahora podemos activar la función de interpretación.
Thank you. We may now activate the interpretation feature.
Muy buenos días, familia. Mi nombre es Ana Rosa Rizo Centino y estoy súper feliz de estar con todos ustedes. Antes de empezar, quiero pedirle permiso a mi amiga Theresa Romero de la banda de Santa Inés Chumash. Ella es directora de la Oficina del Medio Ambiente.
Good morning. I'm Theresa Romero, and I'm with the Santa Inés Chumash. I'm the environmental director, and welcome. I am from the ancestral village of Tipu in northern Chumash territory, and I want to acknowledge my ancestors and the lands that we are on today. I am here because of my ancestry. And I ask that we all listen today to the stories being shared, that we listen with open hearts. And I want to bless each of those that are sharing their stories today with us all and to their voices, and that we listen with open ears and open hearts. And I send blessings over to us all. And I thank you for being here today. Kakinas, thank you.
Gracias, Teresa. Así que hay que empezar con un respiro
So
profundo.
let's start with a deep breath. The purpose of our gathering today is to talk about our experiences that occurred during natural disasters and what it is that we need to do to keep strong as we face challenges around climate change. You will hear from many folks who will share their stories of resilience. It'll be good for all of us to listen, as Teresa mentioned, with open ears and an open mind and an open heart. And after hearing from the folks who will share their stories, we will also have an opportunity to talk amongst ourselves to share how this experience has been to be in a space in which the main language is Spanish, right? To share how this experience is, because that's usually not our reality. Then we are going to have the opportunity to have lunch, and then after we take a break, we will come back and listen from other participants. And so I want to start off introducing Jorge Toledano. He is an organizer with MyCop, and he was a farm worker before that. And he has also worked with Líderes Campesinas, creating videos around sexual harassment. And he's going to share a lot of good points with us. So please, let's give all of our attention to Jorge.
No me miro en mi cámara.
Can you see me? Am I on camera? We can't see your camera right now. I think the host deactivated my video.
Can someone help allow Jorge to share his camera, please?
Yeah.
There we go.
Buenos días.
Well, good morning. My name is Jorge Toledano Ortiz. And I'm a community organizer with the community organizing project Mixteco Indígena. I'm from the Nusavi community, people of the rain. As a people, we've overcome a lot of challenges since the invasion up until today. We left our home country to look for a better future for our families, and we immigrated to this country in which there is some form of respect, supposedly. That's and that's what is presented as if we'll have respect here. But when we get here, we have to face other challenges in terms of language, customs, and our day-to-day life. And we have lived through discrimination, abuse in the workplace, and in many aspects of our lives. We have to be resilient, and but we always put our best foot forward. We're always working hard. You know, like we really step up to these challenges as indigenous people that we are. We've lived through this and more. We continue to be in the struggle of for social justice so that we can fight against discrimination and these divisions amongst so many groups and communities, because within our own race or our own country, that discrimination exists. We have always, it exists among our politicians, you know, politicians will say, go to other countries. Oh, this country doesn't have human rights, but within our own country, we don't have rights as indigenous folks. And so for us, those of us who are here in California, those of us who live here in Ventura, the largest fire that I've ever experienced was the Thomas Fire a few years ago, and it was a very strong fire, and we saw so many things surface in which the indigenous community in the fields suffered a lot. So we're going to talk a little bit about what I went through during that fire. My family and I were working in the fields, and others in constructions and other jobs like that. And so when the fires came, the power went out. You couldn't see anything in the streets, and we didn't know what was happening. We didn't know why the power was out, because often that information isn't available. We just saw the smoke, and we don't have a medium to be informed in our own language. Often the streets will be closed, but we don't know why, because we don't speak English. And so when authorities close the streets, they'll post up notices in English, but not in Spanish. And so imagine someone who doesn't even speak Spanish. How are they going to understand? So the power goes out, the food goes bad in the fridge, and all of the food that you have to refrigerate, the perishables, goes bad. And so I dare say that 80% of farm workers in the county of Ventura, 80% of them are indigenous, Zapotec, Mixtec, Triquis, and from other communities. And so the majority of indigenous folks in this county are Mixtec and Zapotec, who are working in the fields. And when that happens, when there's a fire or any kind of disaster that happens, we're not receiving the information as quickly as others are getting it in their languages or in English or Spanish. And so we are fortunate, well, we've worked very hard to uh, break that language barrier with the Mixteco Indigenous Community Organizing Project and other colleagues that we've worked with. We have a radio show, or we have access to be able to do Facebook Lives to inform our community about everything that's happening with regards to the fire. And so all of that we're doing all of that to break these barriers, but there's a lot more that we have to be thinking of in regards to the information that is publicized. Often when we're working, we are affected by the smoke. It's a lot of smoke that we're inhaling. And I don't want to say that in our own towns or countries or our lands, you know, we don't have any fires. Yes, we have fires there. But the difference is that here there's a lot of chemicals that are used in power plants or agriculture, and all of that rises when there's fires. And so that's another set of chemicals that we have to inhale. And so the farm worker can't go to do a regular medical checkup. Why? Because we don't have health insurance. We don't have the economic means to go get checked or see a doctor. And so often when the fires happened, it was weeks that the fires was going on, a couple of weeks. The smoke didn't let us work. And as a result of that, the ashes that fell on top of the crops, the strawberry, the berries, everything that we were working on, all of that went bad. You know, it didn't pass for quality control. So imagine that we're working 8 to 9 hours a day. When the fire was happening, we were working maybe 2 hours a day, 4 hours a day. And after the fires, there wasn't a lot of work to do because the product available to harvest wasn't available. As it usually is prior to the fires. And so all of that brings up a lot of concerns for us because we are not eligible for unemployment. Why? Because we don't rely on a valid social security number for this country. We also can't demand that our hours be paid. You know, if you work 2 hours, or if you work 4 hours, you're going to get paid 2, or because the employer can't really give you a sick time off. And so I appreciate those who have collaborating with us, like Líderes Campesinas, Future Leaders of America, like Cause, who created an organization or a fund called 805 UndocuFund, and they were providing support for the undocumented folks who were affected by the fire. And so I got to be a volunteer for that program and listen to the stories of the people who were affected. And believe me that there's a lot of things that we can't solve as much as we want. And it hurts because we're in a country where we're supposed to uphold respect for human rights. Or, you know, we predicate that this country in front of other countries, that this country is one in which the human rights of people are respected, but they aren't. And much less are the rights of farm workers or indigenous peoples. And it's hard to be sharing this, but this is what we're experiencing in this country.
Muchísimas gracias, Jorge. ¿Alguien tiene una pregunta?
Thank you, Jorge. Does anybody have any questions for Jorge before we continue?
Okay, Jorge, gracias por su trabajo, por siempre poner tanto empeño en la comunidad.
Thank you for your work and for your hard work in the community.
La siguiente persona
Yes,
va
of
a ser
course.
JJ
The next
Ortiz,
person will be
y él
JJ
está,
Ortiz, and he
programa que se llama
is
Turf to
coming,
Surf.
he's hosting a program,
Es una
coordinating a
iniciativa
program
de
called Turf to
integración
Surf.
basada en
It
Santa
is a
Bárbara,
program, a reintegration program for folks coming out of juvenile detention centers in Santa Barbara. And through this program, you're changing cycles of violence by teaching youth to surf. So thank you, JJ, for being here with us.
Hey, how's it going? Can you guys see me?
Sí.
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, my name is JJ Ortiz. I'm a co-founder with Turf to Surf. To follow up with what Jorge was saying, I'm a first-generation Mexican, born here. My mom immigrated from here, so to connect the dots, you know, we primarily worked with at-risk youth that is active in gang or affiliated with gangs, and or kids that were coming out of boys camp, coming out of juvenile institutions, and we even got to reach out to some of the guys that were actually AWOL'd from boys camp. We luckily had access to them and got them to participate in. We held a multiple 2-week programs for these youth in the summer, and which for us worked in different facets. We had an element where we would bring people that were associated with the local community college, and so they could these youth could get informed with programs, or even start thinking about attaining higher education after high school, and connecting those dots. We also gave them basically just 2 weeks of having something a little bit different than their everyday summers. You know, as a youth myself, I did live close to a boys club, but I always felt out of place when it came to the boys club. I did run with the gang. I was hanging out with the fellas. And so when it came to choosing between us and the kids that were actually paying for the daycare at the boys club, we were second fiddle, and oftentimes we got kicked out. So we provided this 2-week program where these kids could have fun for the summer, even though they were like towards the end of being kids. You know, they were young men at this point. And so we'd take them surfing, we'd give them everything they need. Surfing is not a cheap sport. It wasn't attainable to me as a youth. I came across surfing as a young kid, not having a daycare, but going to with my mom to work and cleaning houses, and going to these beautiful houses on the beach, and seeing kids in surf camps, and that's where the idea got started. So knowing how that felt, we provided these 2 weeks with these kids to be kids again, and learn how to surf, and also bridge the gap between their culture and beach culture, and start getting them used to getting out of their comfort zone. We did that for 7 years, and I still talk to a lot of the fellas that were participated in the program, and a lot of them are doing well, and some of them, you know, are still dealing with struggles and working past that. But yeah, that was Turf to Surf.
Gracias, JJ. Veo que hay unas preguntas, una para Jorge y otra creo que es general. Antes de llegar al video de Juanita, quiero empezar para preguntarte, Jorge, si puedes regresar a la cámara.
If we can just go back to the camera of Jorge, how can people become more active in helping indigenous people living in America? I think respecting our culture, our language, the way we think is a start. That's the main thing that we want to get through. Everyone has their own ideas, but we all have to be responsible for respecting each other. It's also important to learn people's history, especially indigenous people and where we come from. Is there anyone running for office that comes from an indigenous culture? At the moment, I don't have a lot of knowledge if anyone is running for office, but there's a lot of people that are focused on especially helping our indigenous communities. And we're working with a lot of people that are working to help us and respect us and get across what we're trying to accomplish. Every day we are waking up and working, and even right now with the pandemic happening, we get sick, but we still go out and work. But we are facing other problems such as lack of hours and not being paid or adequate hours. I know I qualify for my 80 hours, but they tell me that I don't qualify, and they don't give you any explanation as to why they're doing this. They just tell you you don't qualify, and they just ignore you when you ask them questions.
Pues el incendio, todos los trabajadores del campo no descansamos o no descansan.
Farm workers, we never get a break, whether it's raining, there's fires. They say that there's a thing that says there's never a break for those that are always tired. And that's especially true for farm workers. We are working through the pandemic, and I've had to work under conditions including strong rain, strong winds. This isn't just an issue for indigenous communities, it's for all farm workers, but we are working towards finding solutions.
Gracias a la lucha de los demás hermanos, compañeros, que tenemos el recurso para trabajadores agrícolas en el condado de Ventura, y este programa nos ha ayudado
And thanks to everyone's efforts, we are making strides in the right direction, but we still need more help.
No hay chance para que tengamos acceso, ¿verdad? A los espacios donde estamos rodeados. Aquí está el mar y nunca podemos ir, ¿verdad? Y luego
It's awful because we are so close to the beach, but we can't even experience those luxuries sometimes just because we are always working. There's a question for JJ in the group chat.
Do you think these kids, young guys, don't always feel comfortable at the beach because of the cultural divide? Do you feel this is a cultural issue we need to address? Knowing that more families need to be at the beach to cool off as the climate heats and we have more hot days. And also in the chat, they're asking for the name of the program, which I saw you just answered, Turf to Surf. So do you have an answer for Sharon's question, JJ?
Yeah, most definitely. I think going to the beach is, I mean, depends on where you're living, you know, and where I grew up wasn't very close to the beach as far as like having access to, or a ride to go there. So yeah, a lot of these kids didn't even know how to swim. So we had to teach them how to swim before they participated in the program. But yes, it is a little bit different when you go to the beach, you go with your friends and your mob and like, you know, 5 deep, then you start turning heads. Who are these guys? They don't look like they belong here. And so yes, there's a cultural divide there of not feeling comfortable because it's not where you usually hang out, and also because you're not used to being seen there in a group like that. And so people might get uneasy because you're not wearing the board shorts they're rocking, or you're not wearing, you know, you stand out. But that's what the whole program was about, is breaking down those barriers and also connecting people from the beach culture and from, you know, a beautiful gang culture, but you know, that has a lot of positives as well. So yeah.
Okay, thank you, JJ. I mean, Dickie shorts are more comfortable anyway, right? So.
That's right.
Veo otra pregunta para Jorge en el chat.
There's another question for Jorge in the chat. Is there a possibility to make a video about farm workers during the pandemic. There has been a lot of reporters that have come to interview us, local news sources mainly, just to see what the day-to-day is like. A lot of news sources did come and follow us in our day-to-day life, but sometimes our bosses don't allow cameras to fully document everything that's happening.
Puede venir represalias, a veces los dueños o los patrones tienen miedo de que la gente hable lo mal que está pasando.
One of the main problems we face is who's allowed to speak to these interviewers, just because our bosses are very strict about what they say, what the workers say about the conditions in which we are working. And that's one of the main challenges that we've been facing.
¿Quién puede hacer ese documento? Bueno, ¿quién puede hacer la historia? Porque hemos hablado con muchos.
And we run into the challenge of who can even record something so genuine and so real about our day-to-day life, because there are so many barriers and so many restrictions.
Pero creo que hay manera que lo podamos hacer.
But I think there is a way in which we can make this work. We do have people that have spoken and have shared their experiences, but many times we are restricted because of our work schedule.
No están cumpliendo con la ley, otros que sí.
But there's restrictions because our bosses are worried that we will speak out about the injustices that are happening in the workplace. And that's why
Dicen, no, pues no vamos a
these
dar
restrictions exist.
pero no aquí en mi terreno o mi rancho o donde tengo mi fresa o mi mora o lo que estén produciendo.
Yeah. Okay, gracias. Hay otra
Thank you so much for sharing.
Are there any financial logistical barriers for turf to surf kids to reach the beach? Are parking fees, transportation major issues for access? Do these kids face harassment, or does it stem mostly from culturally ingrained images of who gets to be at the beach?
Yeah, I know, I mean, to give you a little taste of that, I know E60, ESPN did a little kind of story on the surf program, and I think we took a bunch of kids to the U.S. Open of surfing just to get them to experience that and experience surfing on a competition level. One of my best friends is Bobby Martinez, one of the only Chicano surfers that went pro and was on the top 100 surfers in the world. And right when we got there, we were being followed by a police presence, and till they told us to leave. So that was like one incident that the cameras caught, you know, in your face of what that experience is like. And so yes, there is barriers, you know. We literally had to provide, you know, thanks to Channel Islands here in Santa Barbara, we provided everything the kids needed, the youth needed, from sunscreen to beach towels. So yeah, there is definitely barriers that come from like their, you know, not having, you know, enough to get you to the beach, or even to have, we provide them with lunch. You know, you go to the beach and you have nothing to eat after, you know, being in the water. So yeah, there's definitely that.
Thank you, Gigi. So I'm not seeing any other questions for Jorge and JJ, so we're going to move on to the video. The video is of Juanita Colmenares, and she is a volunteer. Disculpa. Vamos a seguir a Juanita Colmenares. y ella es una voluntaria de causa.
Juanita is a volunteer with Ghouta, and we are going to play her video now. And we want to thank JJ and Jorge for their testimonies. Thank you for sharing their experiences during these difficult times.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Juanita. Soy una voluntaria de causa.
Hello, my name is Juanita.
Me pidieron que hablara acerca de
and I'm asked to share my story
en los desastres que han pasado.
That I've been experiencing with these natural disasters,
La pandemia. Entonces,
especially the pandemic.
Preguntas y voy a tratar de contestarlas a lo mejor que pueda.
I have some questions and I'm going to answer them as best as I can.
Todos esos desastres ha afectado en su trabajo y realmente sí. Yo trabajo en un hospital.
And truly, yes.
Las horas
I work at a hospital.
Y
and
a veces tenemos horas
where I work,
de vacaciones y eso.
sometimes we have vacation
horas.
time.
No son muchas, entonces
It's not a lot of
hay muchas
time off,
que tenemos que
but
trabajar menos, tenemos menos
often we have
y es muy difícil estar pagando la renta.
often we have to, you know, work more as is because we have to pay rent.
Esas cosas ahorita porque pues no
and we have to just save money to be able to afford a lot of the things that we need on a day-to-day basis because rent is so expensive.
Y entonces ¿a dónde vamos a vivir?
And so to think about having to relocate and think about
me necesitan. Yo soy la única
where we have to move
estar ahí en el
and
aguantar, ¿verdad? Lo que nos
and you know, sometimes I also think about like if I wanted to get a different job, like where would I go to find one?
La pandemia porque pues ha cortado
and so
y no sabemos qué hacer. Hemos
amidst
de buscar otros trabajos.
this pandemic, we've had our hours cut and we've tried to look for other
Entonces,
jobs.
No hay,
but often there aren't many available.
Problemas para agarrar personal porque no
and we struggle a lot
ha entrado
in being,
entonces ese es el problema.
and we also struggle in finding people to work as well in the hospital. So even finding staff to fit the roles there, then there's a lot more work for us that we have to do.
Pregunta número 2 es
And the second question
vivienda en las condiciones de vida. Y sí, ha
is,
sido muy fuerte. He tenido que
sorry, the audio is not very clear.
Tuve que rentar uno porque pues yo sola no puedo.
And so given the current conditions, I had to rent out one of the rooms in my house.
Yo tengo una hija y un hijo, entonces mucho,
I have a daughter and a son,
casa
and so,
pues ustedes
you know,
puede pasar.
I do worry about having, you know, people living in my home because, you know, I have a daughter. And so you don't know what might happen. And the question number 3 is, what resources do community members need to face natural disasters? And so, well, information is very important. It helps us plan.
Pero a lo mejor algunas personas que tienen un poco más de dinero que nosotros podrían.
But financial help would be important. I know that money is scarce, but perhaps folks who have money available to them that are wealthier could support in that way. As people go through these difficult times. And so hopefully there's something that we can establish that for folks to donate and contribute, or and just ways for the county and the city to be better prepared for these disasters and then therefore better protect our community.
Tener algún lugar donde se pueda ir a buscar cosas, a donde se pueda ir a buscar ayuda, porque
Just any kind of hub where we can access resources and aid.
necesitamos
That would really help.
algún lugar donde se pueda uno
We
escribir o que nos manden mensajes o
need to have sites where people can sign up to receive information.
sí lo hay, pero
And I know that there are,
necesitamos más para
but we need more of that
nosotros ayudarnos nosotros y ayudar
so
a
that we can help ourselves and help each other.
pensamos que estamos mal, pero hay veces que hay otros que están peor que
And sometimes we think we're not well off, but there's people who are even worse off.
¿Cómo podemos ayudar?
And so let's think about how we can help one another.
Creo que eso es lo que necesitamos.
I think that
Información.
that's what we need, but most importantly, information.
Los lugares que puedan, no sé, dar comida o
Having sites where there's food distribution
o ropa o algo.
or clothing donations, anything like that,
Y no se puede
because it's a very critical situation
compras ahorita porque pues
right now.
es difícil conseguir y el dinero
There isn't enough money to go shopping right now,
comida que uno puede tratar de
and it's barely enough to be able to afford food on the day-to-day.
en mi caso solamente
And so in my case,
entonces necesito yo estar buscando
I only have
puedo yo agarrar
one job, and so I need to source whatever
para poder
we need
y
through just many creative means to cover our basic necessities.
todo esto que ustedes
And so thank you for all of this work that you all are doing
podemos y qué es lo que necesitamos y pues
to consider what it is that we need.
que ustedes tengan algunas buenas poder ayudar
And hopefully you all come up with good ideas in being able to support
y hasta luego.
these communities. And I hope you have a good afternoon and goodbye.
Yo sé que para varios el audio no funciona muy bien.
Hola.
I know that
Para varios el audio no funciona muy bien.
Hola,
I know that for many the audio wasn't very good. I had seen this video before starting, so I wanted to highlight one of the points that she was mentioning in case you couldn't really hear her. First of all, she was sharing that for many workers, their hours have been cut where they work, and so it's very hard to pay and afford rent. So she's had to rent out rooms in her apartment to be able to cover rent. And basically asking folks who have more resources available to be able to share these resources. If you can provide funds, to donate funds, food or blankets or clothing, if you have extras of those. Basically for those who have more, to give more during these very difficult times. So now we're gonna take a 5-minute break and we will return at 10:50 with Ana Rico from the Community Environmental Council. Thank you for being here, and we will return at 10:50.
Marcos V. López es el que va a empezar. Ahora él es Chumash y Chicano, vive en Santa Bárbara y creció en el Valle de San Fernando.
Marcos Lopez
Él es capitán del,
was raised in the San Fernando Valley,
es un educador en la escuela intermediaria de Santa
and
Bárbara.
he is an educator in Santa Barbara. He's a mentor. He's an interpreter. He's an activist. He dances with the resistance group, La Weekly, and he pretty much does everything. He went to UCSB.
estudios políticos, ciencias políticas.
He studied political science,
Y está trabajando en
and he is
su
working
maestría en educación
on his master's
con una énfasis
with
en la ciencia social,
his master's in education,
escribiendo sobre currículo para gente indígena.
and
Él es
with an
coordinador
emphasis on
del
indigenous communities.
movimiento de Ethnic Studies Now, o
And
Estudios
he
Étnicos
is
Ahora de Santa Bárbara, con la meta de que sea
focused on ethnic studies
requerimiento para
and
graduación para todos los
working
estudiantes.
so that it becomes a requirement in order to graduate.
Y colaborador a varios programas
He's a
para
mentor
promover
and a coordinator with a lot of youth groups such as Nature Corps,
de
Just
la Costa
Communities,
Central, Santa Barbara Police Activities League, Native
Santa Barbara Police
Water,
Activities
y
League,
Tribal Youth y mucho más.
and
Por
many
darle
more.
la bienvenida a Marcus Victor Lopez.
Please
Gracias
welcome
por
him.
estar con nosotros.
Thank you for being with us.
Haku. Hello, everyone. My name is Marcus Victor Oliver Lopez. I'm Chumash and Chicano, and in sharing stories of resilience today, and listening to our previous panelists, I brought up a lot of emotions and stories that I had in my mind that what I wanted to share, but then that now is a little different. Jorge started off talking about the Thomas Fire and how there was the biggest fire he'd ever seen, and it was a huge fire. We could see it here from Santa Barbara. During the first days of the Thomas Fire, I was lucky to be involved with a community of folks in which we gathered a lot of supplies to take down to the Ventura, Oxnard, Salicoy area. Naira Pacheco, who's one of the interpreters today, we were in the cul-de-sac and just waiting for stuff, and we drove down to give the stuff to families that would really need those items. And who knew that fire would spread all the way to the hills here in Santa Barbara. Luckily, there's a misconception about what Santa Barbara is and what even Montecito is. It's not always just full of rich people. My family has been living in Montecito for a long time. Since the 1800s, we've been living there and owned our land there. Unfortunately, due to discrimination, we weren't granted the abilities to get insurance, to get these things that normal people have that ability to, the privilege to have these things, because we are indigenous, we are Chumash, we are people of color. A lot of discrimination, a lot of people looking to take the land out from under us, from our family. And so once the Thomas Fire was put out, several weeks later, we had a storm that that caused a lot of what people say debris flow. Now, technically, I call it a mudslide. I was on the property. Luckily, there was a huge explosion from a gas line that looked really close. It looked like my neighbor's house was on fire, was blowing up from my window. And so, I got up and went to, in my little casita, my little home, walking over to my dad's little home, who's my neighbor. And I go, Dad, look at that. Looks like the neighbor across the fence, looks like their house is on fire. And with his scraggly hair, when you wake up in the morning, your hair is all over the place, and he's like, let me get ready. Let's go over there and see if we can help. And during that time, I turned around and started taking pictures of the night sky, all lit up in orange from this explosion. Hearing on our property is where Montecito Creek pretty much meets the East Valley Road, or some people know it as the 192. Hearing what sounds like 10 Mac 10 trucks coming down fast and rotating, from having my eyesight in one direction, rotating to the opposite side. And with the orange night sky, seeing a wave that was 25, 30 feet, hard to determine, but seeing that wave crash through and seeing trees snap like toothpicks and seeing it all go. And for those brief moments, figuring out, how am I going to be safe? Climbing on the roof, going to my truck and driving out of there, running. I chose running. And when you are in these heightened situations, there's like this blankness in my mind of what transpired. My dad says I was yelling to run and get the F out. I don't remember saying that, but he says he heard me say it, yelling it. And as I ran to higher ground through mud that is just piling up higher and higher, getting to the street and seeing electrical poles and the wires kind of like a wave, and then transformers blowing. I thought that was the end. I'm glad it wasn't. I looked back behind me and my dad wasn't there. So I turned around and went back, and that initial wave was that big moment. We were able to get my aunt out of her house, get my uncle awake. We were all in different little homes on our property. And on the other side of the creek, we lost some homes and some other structures and vehicles. But that area, or my uncle's neighbors, they lost their lives. And so as we were fortunate to walk out of there, walk through power lines, and to be on a kind of like an island, as we couldn't leave without military assistance. The questions that are come to my mind is, how can the communication have been better to those communities? Because those neighbors of my uncle who lived on the other side of the creek, they passed. They weren't rich. They lived in little homes there too. And as we tried to go back, or I should say, as I tried to go back and forth, the blatant discrimination from visiting police forces that were asked to come to the area. There are some local sheriffs, they're like, Mark, is cool, go ahead. Because my dad and uncle stayed, they've never left. Local sheriffs that I knew, that I've built relationships with and working in this community, they knew. The local CHP, they knew. But when visiting people came, no access. I don't fit the description of a Montecito resident. And I'm lucky that the work that my family and I has done over the decades through the danza that I do, through La Casa de la Raza, through all these different community members, some here present today, were able to lend a helping hand to our family so we could clean up and start the rebuilding process. Have we finished? It's been 2.5 years, and by no means are we finished. There's still the distrust that we have in government because of the past governments. The United States government has towards their policies towards indigenous peoples. How do we change that? How do we have the right people, the leaders, to mend those situations, mend those communities, to help out the Mixteco and Zapotec communities that have migrated here? They're living here with us. How do we do that? How do we have nonprofits listen to us, indigenous voices? Nonprofits have land. We don't get access to them. There are lands. The land acknowledgement that my fellow Chumash person, Theresa, gave, that's wonderful. But certain nonprofits need to give back some of that land. Need to fight for to allow us to go back to our homelands, to do our ceremonies. So that way we can invite other communities to be part of those ceremonies. So that way we can move forward in this world together and build a stronger community. We know you're here, but we need that strength. We've been here and been resilient for hundreds of years, and we're going to continue being resilient. That doesn't change. But wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to be resilient 24/7, and we can work together and we break down some of those huge barriers? I'd like that. I would like to see that in my lifetime. That mudslide was not the first natural disaster I've experienced, but I wanted to share that one and share that frightening and traumatic time with you all. It is connected, Thomas Fire, debris flow, and how do we work towards communicating with our communities to be prepared and be ready. Thank you.
Gracias, Marcus Victor. ¿Hay preguntas para Marcus Victor?
Thank you, Marcus Victor. Is there questions for Marcus Victor before continuing? I see.
Methods or outlets of information dissemination. What technology is accessible? Also, where can people give their surplus of resources to? Una cosa que yo noté después del último incendio
Something
es
that I noticed from the last fire is that the county information published in Spanish wasn't accurate, and it was cut out. Only parts of the information was being published. So I had to connect with county officials to ask them that they change the information and have it be accurate and complete. So I think that that issue of language justice is a key form in making sure that the info reaches people. And in regards to resources, many of the organizations here make sure that these resources get to the community. I know that Casa de la Raza, we provide food every week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And so this is one organization can do it. MyCop, Cause, many of our groups help to make sure that these resources can get to people. So I think the answer would be that there's a lot of ways to have those that reach folks. If there are no more questions for Marcus, we'll continue. Thank you so much, Marcus, for your testimony. I know this was a very hard period for you.
Your family and our community, thank you for your testimony and sharing your story. And I hear that question, like, we are so resilient, but why do we have to be so resilient all the time? Muchas gracias, Marcus.
Thank you, Marcus. We are resilient, but why do we have to be so resilient through colonization, capitalism, and everything that happens right now? The next person who will speak with us is Ana Rico. She works with Community Environmental Council, and she will share with us a video. Thank you. You're like a namesake to me, and you're welcome to share your story.
Thank you so much for everyone that is here today. I am Ana Rico. I am the ambassador for Santa Barbara Environmental Council in Southern California. We've been working on the front lines during the pandemic as part of a project called CARE. We are offering the community resources and immediate help for people that don't apply for government resources. We ask people, how has the current situation affected you and how can we help you? Our main thing is, how can we listen to these people and how can we help them based on what they say? Sometimes people just need a vent and say their stories, because we've all been experiencing different circumstances, different challenges. So we mainly just try to help and listen. But right now what we're going to do is show you guys 3 videos. One of them is Guadalupe. She's a farm worker. And 2 are other people that have been working and just sharing their experiences during these difficult times. The video is in Spanish, but the subtitles are in English. And I will play this now.
Y en Los Álamos es más caliente, muy caliente. Allá se ha visto muchos casos de desmayos, se ha visto mucha gente deshidratándose. Es difícil trabajar en el campo. Como le digo, de por sí el clima ya es un poquito caliente. Y muchas de las veces personas están en estado de embarazo, muchas de las veces las personas tienen alguna condición médica que sí les afecta. Entonces para esto hubo algo que pusieron unas casitas, y esas casitas se supone que si tú te sientes mal, se supone que deberías de ir a descansar 5 minutos. Aparte del clima, la sobrepoblación en viviendas, es estresante la sobrepoblación en una casa. Y
And there's
lamentablemente
overpopulation in
estar
different
así porque no
houses, and
podemos pagar también.
I'm Kayla Rivera. My mother has systemic lupus, which is an autoimmune disease, which makes her one of the incredibly susceptible people who more than likely would not be able to recover from COVID. She also has issues with her lungs and with breathing, and she has fibromyalgia and all these different things. It was definitely scary knowing that I have immune compromised individuals in my family that very likely could lose their lives based on my exposure to people.
Mi nombre es María Delgado. Mi experiencia fue muy difícil porque
my name is Maria Delgado. My experience was very difficult because as a mother, my son is incarcerated, and they didn't help me at
ya
all.
la segunda vez que estuvo el deslave, la
The
que pasó
second
de
time the
nuevo,
landslide happened,
se vino de
and
nuevo como
then
la lluvia y
the
todo,
fires came
se
after the
deslavó y
rain.
estuvo cayendo mucha ceniza.
There was a lot of
También
falling
me
ash.
dijeron, los policías tocaron a
The
mi
police
puerta,
knocked and
que tiene
said,
que salir. Digo, pero es que no
"You
tengo
have to get
dónde
out
irme,
now."
le dije con mi niño. Dijo, no, se
So
tiene
I
que
can't, I
salir,
have to go
dijo.
with my child.
Estuve media hora afuera con mi niño y arriesgando de que yo me enfermara como estoy mala de la pulmonía y mi niño tiene la diabetes. Nos
I
estuvo
have
cayendo
pneumonia
bastante
and
ceniza.
my child has
El día que
diabetes,
llegaba la transportación el AC.
and there was a lot of ash that was falling on us.
Dijo, ¿para
And
dónde
waiting
van?
for
Es que no
transportation,
tenemos dónde irnos. Y ya
there was nowhere for us to
nos
head.
llevaron a la Isla Vista. Ya. Pero pues estuvo muy feo
So they
ahí.
took us to Isla
Sí nos
Vista,
dieron de
but it
comer,
was very
pero
ugly there. They
tuve
didn't give
muchos
us food,
problemas con mi niño de
but I
que
had a
no
lot of
podía
issues with my
cambiarlo de
son
diaper
because I couldn't
porque pues como
change
ya
his
está
diaper
grande
because
y
since
pues
he's grown,
no tenían cómo ponerme algo para que yo
and they couldn't share anything
cambiar a mi niño y se me hacía muy
to help me
difícil
change my
para estarlo
son.
cargando cada rato, sentarlo y llevarlo al baño.
¿Tu hijo cuántos años tiene?
Él
How old
tiene
is your son?
24 años.
He's 24 years old.
Quería compartirles un poquito más sobre de María.
I want to share more about Maria. She's still living in Santa Barbara with her son, who is 24 years old, and this happened 2 years ago. In that moment, he was 21. He's in a wheelchair and he has difficulty hearing. As a mother, I put myself in her position.
Es tu hijo, para poder cambiarlo en frente de toda la gente y que la gente no te entienda.
Trying to explain what's happening with your child and explaining that to people that just don't know and have never experienced that. Hearing that, it was very difficult for me to hear. Like I mentioned, I have children and it's very difficult because I try to think about her situation and not just her situation, but everyone else that has experienced something similar. And sometimes there's simply no help. Sometimes they tell you, go find help here, go there, talk to this person. But sometimes because of our situation, we just don't qualify for this help. And it's such a big frustration that so many people just don't understand. But you know, you just need this help, but there's just no way for you to access it. It could be that you don't have the proper documents. You just don't qualify for the resources.
La persona que la ayudó del EasyLive fue quien le sugirió a dónde ir, porque ella no sabía dónde ir.
Someone had to tell her where to go because she had no direction as to where to go during the situation. But thank you so much for this space and for letting us share these stories.
Ahora, si quieren, como dijo Ana, preguntarle algo a Ana, y veo que también hay un par de preguntas para Marcus. No question, just a statement of appreciation to Marcus for the call to return land and support Native people to reconnect with their ceremonies and ability to invite others to join in those ceremonies. that will build community cohesion and help reunite our broken culture. And another person saying, thank you, Marcus. What kind of land reparations from nonprofits are wanted and needed in this region at this time? And not sure if you want to talk about Ghouta Street at all and any ways that people can support that fight.
Well, land reparations are different from renaming a street.
Right, just meant in addition to that.
There's nonprofits in our communities that hold quite a number. They own kind of a lot of land, and we don't. You know, the San Ynez Band of Chumash Indians have a great community center up there at the tribal hall, and they're building a museum, and that's gonna be a fantastic place for people to gather. But San Ynez is kind of far, you know, for some of us that don't have means for transportation. Down here in Santa Barbara, there is no place for us to gather. We have to go and ask people to use their space to gather. And the biggest one would be the Nature Conservancy, which owns maybe, I'm gonna guesstimate, about 3/4 of Santa Cruz Island. That's a huge island, and if you own 3/4 of it, it's maybe even a little bit more. But not having access to our old village sites, not having access to our ceremonial sites, not just on the islands, but here in the mountains as well, in the Los Padres National Forest. Not having that access is, in trying to reach for it and trying to attain it and do it the proper way. It's a lot of barriers, a lot of paperwork, and a lot of meetings, which I feel that we're up for it, but it's a huge process. And Ana alluded to the renaming of Indio Muerto Street to Ghouta Street here in Santa Barbara. We've had Indio Muerto for a long time, and it's taken a long time to get it renamed. And there is a meeting at the City Council on September 29th, where they will be listening to our presentation to get it renamed. We've already presented to the Santa Barbara Neighborhood Advisory Council. They were all for it. And so we look forward to having it renamed. If anybody would like to write a letter of support, hopefully the organizers here can share my information, and you can send those letters of support to myself and to the Santa Barbara City Council.
Thank you so much, Marcus Victor. Gracias, Marcus Victor. ¿Hay alguna otra pregunta?
Is there any other questions? Well, if there aren't any other questions, I think that this is all we have.
Nicole is actually asking if you can share your contact information. Está poniendo su información de contacto.
He's writing in his contact info. And yes, that's it. That's all we have for this morning's session. Right now, we are going to take a break, and then we are going to return at 1, correct? Yes, am I right in saying 1 p.m.?
Ana Rosa, yes, we will be back at 1, but are we going to do a small panel with our partners?
Oh, okay. I thought that was after the break, but if we want to do the panel now, we can. Let's go ahead and move forward with that. So ahora vamos a tener unas panelistas de las organizaciones que tuvimos, que organizaron este evento. ¿Dónde está el slide para eso? Pensé que tenemos un slide para presentar las personas que van a estar. Gracias. Así que tenemos a Genevieve Flores Aro, directora de la organización MICOP.
Thank you. We have Genevieve Flores Haro, Associate Director of MyCop, Lucia Marquez, who's an organizer with Cause. We have Teresa Romero, who is part of the Chumash, San Inez, a band of Chumash, and then Jennifer Hernandez, who works for the Community Environmental Council. So thank you for all of those who shared your stories of resilience. We'll continue with the panel now.
I can start us off while everybody works out on their end. Thanks. My name is Jenn Hernandez. I'm the Energy and Climate Program Associate with Community Environmental Council. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Okay. And yeah, thank you to everybody for sharing your stories. I'm really grateful to be here speaking with you all and with Lucia and Teresa and Genevieve. We're collaborating on this roundtable through the Central Coast Climate Justice Network. We're a group of social justice and environmental organizations that are working together to create a more resilient and just region in the intersection of climate change and racial injustice. And I want to thank the attendees also for being here to listen. I think it's really important to recognize our role and to recognize the privilege and the power of some of our own organizations and agencies to keep these stories alive and to really let them drive our work. We also have an opportunity to slow down a little bit and acknowledge the history of who's helped create the pathways for many of the resiliency and climate adaptation solutions that we're able to advocate for and put into our programs and plans. These experiences that we heard about today are the same ones that have driven movements that sometimes take lifetimes of labor and organizing to fight for. And as we're hearing, there's still a great disparity in access for people, not just to these solutions, but for their voices to be heard and for their experiences to be validated, and even just for them to exist safely, even during natural disasters, when it seems like that would kind of be a basic right extended to anyone. So we have the opportunity to recognize these deeply embedded power structures that we maybe didn't create, but that we're all working within, and re-examine how to make them better, whether it's by redefining what it means to do environmental or conservation or climate work, and advocating within the agencies we work for to do planning differently and center the stories that we heard today. So yeah, I'm glad to be able to play a part in facilitating these spaces where these conversations can keep happening. Thanks again. Joining us today.
Gracias, Jennifer. Sí, así que si cada persona puede.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yes, so if each person can speak a little bit about your organization and what you are doing to create solutions for climate change, and as I mentioned, resilience in our communities. Genevieve? Yes, I can go. Good morning. Once again, my name is Genevieve Flores Haro. I'm the Associate Director with Mexico Indigenous Community Organizing Project, better known by our initials MICOP or MICOP because we're multilingual, right? And so you all heard from my colleague Jorge a little bit about the work that we do. Basically, we have worked in Ventura County since 2001. Our founder was a nurse who she saw the need, or she saw that there was a large community of folks who spoke Mixteco. And from then we grew into a quite large organization. We have approximately 75 people on our staff. And sometimes people think that we're tiny, but no, we're kind of big. And right now we're working in Santa Barbara County and Santa Maria. And we serve the indigenous migrant community. We're not technically an organization that works on issues of the environment, but due to the community that we work with, it's part of the culture. You heard from Jorge that Mixtecos, the Mixtec people in their language, they're people of the rain. Zapotecs are people of the clouds. And so there's a very deep connection amongst our communities with the environment. And so that's why we're here, right? Because it's about preserving our languages, our cultures, and to, you know, add our little grain of salt in this area, which is our home now. You know, we're migrants, we're not original peoples of this land. That's the Chumash people. But as caretakers of our own land, we want to contribute to this space. And so part of the work that we're doing is elevating these voices and advocating for folks who don't have legal documentation so that they can access certain needs that they deserve. We've seen through COVID-19 that the farm worker community is still working, and it's very deep what our colleague Marcus was saying about resiliency. Why is it that we always have to be resilient? Sometimes resiliency is just us working within a broken system, right? So we're here advocating for this within this system, you know, to advocate for access to healthcare, access to funds, perhaps you know, due to your immigrant status, you can't access, and to be able to provide this information in our languages. The languages we speak are oral languages, so we do videos, PSAs, radio, to be able to connect with the community so that they are informed as well. So we do a little bit of everything. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Genevieve. Would you like to continue, Teresa? From the Office of the Environment, from the Santa Ynez Chumash.
Good morning,
Band.
everyone. Again, thank you. I'm Theresa Romero, and I am with the Santa Ynez Band of Chumash Indians. I'm the director for the environmental department here. And I've been here for about 5 years now. I'm also a Chumash community member. I am both Northern Chumash and Coastal Chumash. Some of the projects we're working on here within my work with Santa Ynez we are working on climate change adaptation. We have finished a vulnerability assessment that is throughout Chumash traditional territory. For those not familiar, that's about 17,000 square miles and covers 5 counties, including, of course, Santa Barbara County. And as part of that, we are conducting research to the greater Chumash community to find out what's important to the Chumash community. Our assessment is complete, and I have received additional funding, which will assist with planning efforts, again, with outreach to the local Chumash community, to figure out and determine the best ways to protect our resources. And I'm going to echo, as a Chumash community member, some of the issues that Marcus brought up regarding access, because some of our resources are on lands that are held by nonprofits or private landowners. And it's really important for us to have access to the lands which are sacred to us, where we go for ceremony, where we pray, and to understand that the resources are part of us. They're in our DNA, and we need to protect them as the original people here. It's not something that we can separate from ourselves. So it's just really important for those that are in the environmental nonprofit arena and all of the nonprofits to understand. The resources are where our foods, our traditional foods are, where our traditional medicines are. And it's really important to be able to protect those things. And here on the reservation, we do have a small tribal nursery, and we're working on building food security in the community here locally. That's really important for all the indigenous communities to create this food security for ourselves, for our communities. It's what keeps us well and healthy. And if you'd like to keep up with us, we do have a Facebook page. It's you can just look for SYCEO, and that's the San Ynez Shumash Environmental Office. We also have a website. It's syceo.org. And thank you for allowing me to be here and speak.
Gracias, Teresa. Lucia, ¿te gustaría seguir?
Thank you, Teresa. Lucia, would you like to speak from the organization Cause?
Yes, hi everyone. I'm so happy to be here. Again, my name is Lucia Marquez. I'm a policy advocate with Cause, and yeah, there is a lot that our communities have to be resilient for, at least in the Central Coast. You know, we're dealing with drought, extreme heat, wildfires, and across the nation, this pandemic. And you know, when disasters hit our community, whether it's all of those things, the impacts to frontline communities are often really similar, whether that's disruptions to work or unsafe or unhealthy working conditions, lack of safety net or income relief, language accessibility, threats to housing security, and difficulty accessing healthcare. You know, Jorge, what he said earlier was, you know, frontline communities are already experiencing many injustices on top of when disasters are hitting our communities, like, you know, pollution, poor air quality, lack of access to green space. And so really when disasters are hitting communities, its existing disparities are only exacerbated. And so really the work that Cause is doing, you know, is our work is intersectional. We're working on immigrants' rights, housing, workers' rights. All of that work through our advocacy is with efforts to make our communities resilient through the injustices that already exist in our communities, but only become intensified during these disasters. And so some examples of the work that we're doing, I think Juanita did a really good job. Apologies for the poor audio, but, you know, sharing her story around, you know, what she has to do to maintain her housing, a safe place to live during this difficult time. And some of the work that we're doing that, you know, is really trying to get strong tenant protections. This applies during day-to-day, you know, outside of a pandemic or a wildfire or mudslide. But even then, you know, we lost a lot of housing stock during the Thomas fires, during the mudslides, and that threatened housing for a lot of people in Santa Barbara County, where a lot of the wealthy homes in Montecito were unsafe to live in, and tenants throughout Santa Barbara County were being evicted for no cause of their own and really threatening their safe place to live. And so we've been working across the region to pass just cause eviction protections where tenants are protected to maintain their homes if they're following their lease. Also trying to put caps on drastic rent increases. Those are the threats that are being experienced in our communities right now that we're working to, you know, protect our tenants, to give them rights to be able to maintain a healthy place to live. Also addressing workers' rights, where we've been working with statewide partners to address the wildfire smoke and protection for workers, especially outdoor workers, where employers are required to provide their outdoor workers N95 respirators when air quality is threatening to their health. That's something that we have as a temporary standard, but we need it as a permanent standard. We need those protection for workers because we know wildfires are our new normal. That's something that's going to come into our communities probably every single year. And we need to make sure that outdoor workers like farm workers have the safer working conditions than they currently have right now. And yeah, I think we heard it from some of the speakers around difficulty around income. Safety net is a really difficult thing. If you're undocumented, you don't have access to FEMA, you don't have access to unemployment. And that's one of the most challenging things that is being experienced during this pandemic. And so we're trying to get a permanent safety net for all workers, including undocumented workers. And those are just a few examples of the work that we're doing across the region that's really trying to address resiliency among our communities. And this is work that needs to be held strong, policy that we need even outside of disasters, because these are all the existing inequalities that our communities are faced with in or out of a disaster.
Muchas gracias, Lucía. Para cerrar hoy, quiero dar gracias a todos los panelistas y las personas que hablaron y nos dieron.
Thank you so much to all the panelists that participated and shared their stories today.
Tenemos el honor de escuchar lo que compartiste con nosotros hoy. Ahora nomás quiero dar unos puntos.
I just want to share some points
Antes de cerrar,
before we close.
Llenaste la encuesta.
If you filled out the survey that we are going to use in the discussions in the afternoon, this discussion is going to start at 1 p.m. And we are going to have our interpreters to help us during these discussions. If you need someone to send you the link for these discussions, make sure to put it in the chat and share your email so that we could share the link with you guys, because the link will be different. And also fill out the questionnaire that we are providing so that we can get your thoughts over how this event went. And also which times and days would work best for you guys in the future when we do these again.
Lucía de Causa, Teresa de la Santa Inés Banda de Chumash y Jenn del Concilio de Medio Ambiente Comunitario. Este evento fue organizado por el Concilio Concilio del Medio Ambiente Comunitario.
This event was put on by the Community Environmental Council and the Central Coast. Thank you so much to our committee that helped plan this event. Here is our committee that helped put this on so that this event could go as smoothly as possible.
Por apoyar este evento como parte de su serie de Climate Resilience Roundtables y su serie.
Thank you for the Environmental Council for taking this event into consideration and so that we can continue making a difference.
Puedes saber más sobre el Concilio del Medio Ambiente Comunitario en su sitio de internet y también.
You can find out more about the Community Environmental Council by going on their website and the other work that they are doing around climate resilience. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing their stories. And I just want to finish with asking this question. We are very resilient people, but why do we always have to be resilient? We are allowed to enjoy life's pleasures, and it's part of life and part of having a healthy life. And we hope to take the lessons that we heard today to heart and continue using these stories with the work that we are doing.
Just welcome back. Thank you all for rejoining us. We hope that you were enriched by the stories that you heard this morning. This is the breakout discussion part of the roundtable. So the breakout rooms will be by language, so no interpretation will be needed. If you speak in English, your breakout will be in English. If you speak Spanish, it'll be in Spanish. But when we're in this large room, we will be speaking in Spanish. Naira Pacheco and Maria Lozano will again go over how to activate the language interpretation for when we're in the main room today. So here you are, Naira and Maria.
Bienvenidos. Esta sesión se presentará en español con interpretación simultánea en inglés y español. Así que favor de escuchar y hablar en el idioma que se sienta más cómodo.
Welcome back. This session will be facilitated in Spanish with simultaneous interpretation in English and Spanish. So please listen and speak in the language you are most comfortable.
Los espacios multilingües se crean en colectivo. A continuación, repasamos unos acuerdos para apoyar la justicia del lenguaje en esta sesión de diálogo.
Multilingual spaces are created collectively, so we will review some guidelines to help support language justice in this dialogue session.
Favor de solo hablar una persona a la vez para que los intérpretes puedan captar todo lo que dice.
Please speak one person at a time so that the interpreters can capture everything you say.
Les pedimos a todos que hablen en un paso lento y moderado.
We ask everyone to speak at a slow and moderate pace.
Mantengan sus micrófonos en mudo cuando no estén hablando para evitar ruido de fondo.
Please keep your microphone on mute when you are not speaking to avoid background noise.
Si usted es bilingüe, favor de no cambiar de idioma en la misma oración y asegúrese de hablar en el canal de idioma adecuado para asegurar que lo que diga se escuche o interprete o haga clic en audio original.
If you're bilingual, please do not switch back and forth languages in the same sentence, and make sure to speak in the appropriate language channel to ensure you are heard or interpreted for, or choose original audio.
Se da la bienvenida a contribuciones del grupo entero.
Contributions from the entire group are welcome.
En un minuto, cuando terminemos de dar las instrucciones, activaremos la función de interpretación. Si usted está en su computadora, verá aparecer un globo en la parte de abajo de su pantalla. Y si usted está en su teléfono, va a haber 3 puntos en la parte de abajo al lado derecho de su pantalla. Haga clic ahí y haga clic en interpretación de idiomas y seleccione el idioma que habla. Si por algún motivo el audio original suena más fuerte que la voz del intérprete, en cualquier momento puede silenciar audio original.
In just a minute after we finish giving the instructions, we will activate the interpretation feature. If you are on a computer, you will see a globe pop up on the bottom of the screen. If you're on your phone, you will see 3 dots on the bottom, right-hand side of your screen. Click on these and select the language you speak. If for some reason the original speaker's sound is louder than the interpreter you're listening to, you can mute the original audio at any given moment.
Gracias. Ahora podemos activar la función de interpretación.
Thank you. We may now begin.
Así que algunos recordatorios antes de empezar. Cuando estamos
So a
en
few
la...
reminders before starting. Whenever we're in this main room, please turn off your audio. And when we are in our small breakout discussions, you can turn your audio microphone back on. Any instructions that you may need will be on the chat in English and Spanish, and the Google Doc that we will be working on will also be on the chat. If you need help or if you have comments or questions, please write them in the chat. So for the Google Doc, you'll have to go to http tinyurl.com/CRR SOR-notes. So you can see the link in the chat. Please write your name, your affiliation, your pronoun, and anything that you are grateful for from what you have learned in this session. And please write in an asterisk next to your name if you speak Spanish. We will be working out of this document in our second discussion later on. The goals for this roundtable and what we learned in the webinar in the morning are to deepen our understanding of the compounding impacts of climate change and the socio-economic vulnerabilities on our frontline and most impacted workers, as well as those of indigenous peoples. We want to give power and agencies to communities to share their stories and share their solutions. These communities are already experts at responding to crisis, right? As we heard earlier, we're very resilient. We want to ensure that important voices, our problems and concerns and ideas are heard by those in power and people who are in decision-making roles that make decisions that affect or help us, and incorporate into climate and community planning efforts for all of our communities in the Central Coast. We want to generate solutions to be more climate resilient, that these solutions be centered in justice and equity. The principles for the day are to be present. Please put your phone on silent, close your email, and just focus on being present with each other here in this virtual space to the greatest extent you are able to, please. Please, and any other kind of work during this time, don't do it. Just bring in your fullest self, open your mind and your heart so that our dreams and visions can be shared. And please ensure that all voices are welcome, honored, and heard. Stay curious to what you're here listening to and commit to learning from each other. This is a safe space. So we will need to create and build trust and strong relationships to be able to move the work between our organizations together and its perspective and the broader system view and collaborative. And these collective efforts are what will make us successful. We invite you here, as I mentioned, to bring your whole self. Don't just bring your professional self, right? We invite you to take off your usual professional hat. We want to be clear, none of us, not a single person or organization has all the answers. It's not possible for one organization to fix all of the problems we're facing today. So please bring in your gifts, right? Because we all carry our own gifts as individuals that we can share, and we'll only succeed if we all bring what we have to offer. We'll take note of everything that is shared here so that we can learn together. We will synthesize it and everything that we take note on, and then we will send those notes back to you so that we can work together collectively to elevate and enhance our capacity to get things done at the pace and scale needed. We believe that today we will move towards a shared vision with strategy and collaborative action for climate action and resilience for our communities. We won't get all the way there, but together we will move in that direction in a meaningful way. Okay, so thank you so much. And we will put these principles into action, and we welcome your voices, and we invite you to connect with the other participants in a more intimate ways. In a minute, Iris will invite you all to small breakout groups of 5 people, and you will have 3 to 4 minutes to share your reflections with each other from this morning's webinar, right? With the stories that were shared by our colleagues. So please ensure that if you are a Spanish speaker, please ensure you have an asterisk before your name in the roll call. If you don't know how to do that, please send a message to Iris Kelly. When you're not sharing, your role is to listen deeply. It's not about assuming or asking questions. You're just listening. You will be with the same group in both breakout sessions, and this is to help build trust and deeper appreciation for each other. So for the first discussion and dialogue, the questions will be, what was your experience of this morning's webinar? How was it to be in a space where the conversation was in Spanish as a Spanish speaker or as a non-Spanish speaker? What was that experience like for you? What resonated with you from what you heard? So those are the questions, and now Iris will put us into rooms to have these deeper, more intimate conversations for about 20 minutes. If you get put in a breakout room that is not your preferred language, please exit the room and we'll reassign you. Okay, so thank you so much. And hopefully your discussion dialogues are productive and that you learn a lot from them.
Qué felicidad de ver todas sus caras. Si todos pueden preparar a dar un punto que quieren compartir con el resto.
Good to see all of your guys' faces again. If you guys could share just a couple points that you guys were talking about in your breakout room.
¿Qué fue importante que escucharon?
We want to hear your guys' thoughts. And if you guys would like to share with everyone else.
Hey, yeah, I'll go for it. A couple things that I heard in our group. Everyone had really unique, I think, insight into what happened in the webinar, and all very good. But some things that stood out for me was, you know, how do you confront when you hear something such as, you know, Nature Conservancy runs or owns most of Santa Cruz. What does it look like to give that land back? What happens when you work for Nature Conservancy? You know, how do you actually process that and address something that almost like competes with, you know, the work that you're doing? I heard that the bilingual aspect was really interesting, and it almost made people go inward, you know, instead of being so visual and paying attention here, you know, it invited folks to close their eyes and listen a little bit more in a different way. That was really good. A term that I heard talking about protecting peace and having, you know, always coming back to a place where anxiety and the problems of life aren't totally consuming you. I heard the term forest bath. So go outside, get your hands in the dirt, you know, don't necessarily live in what's happening in social media or what's happening in the work that you're doing, but actually go out and experience the world. Yeah, those are 3 really big ones for me, and plenty more, but don't want to take up too much time.
Gracias, Chris. Apreciamos su trabajo con Healing Justice.
I'll go, Ana.
Thank you, Chris, for sharing your story.
Okay.
If you haven't turned on your interpretation,
My interpretation's turned on. I'd like to go next if I could. Yeah or no?
Go ahead, Mark.
I think you have the go ahead, Mark.
Okay, okay. I didn't hear that. Anyhow, okay, so our group, everybody shared initially, and what initially came away was that there was an emotional tone that everybody experienced with the sharing that took place. Everybody kind of felt something one way or another, which was kind of, I thought was interesting. I think for all of us who were in on the early sessions, felt some kind of emotional connection to the narratives that were being shared. One thing about the bilingual aspect of it was somebody stated that it kind of slowed down the whole agenda where people could really kind of be more involved, and it forced them to be more thoughtful in the process than just taking for granted that it was in English. And because it was in Spanish, there was like more attention, paying attention to what was actually being said. So that I thought that was an interesting takeaway. As well as we had a participant that lives in Sonoma and who is surrounded by 2 fires right now. And so it was interesting to hear their perspective and the need for more political will to get them more into a place of resiliency and what kind of, I don't know if they're specifically at this level of communication that we are around community issues, but I just thought that was good, that we kind of had, you know, an out-of-town perspective of what we're doing, that he could probably take some of what he's learning here back to his community and maybe vice versa down the road. So I'll stop there.
Gracias, Mark. ¿Alguien más quiere compartir?
Does anyone else want to share? Thank you so much, Mark, for sharing.
I can share out. This is Jen. Yeah, our group had a few people who were kind of on both sides, from planning the event and attending the event. And so, you know, we kind of talked about how part of the point of this was to come in as listeners, and how for some of us, sometimes we're in the room as either representing our organization or as an expert voice, and how different and nice this was to just be here to listen and sit with what was said. And also just being grateful for just some of the things that maybe were hiccups, or, you know, just weren't really, it was really just the voices of the people that we were there to listen to. And that's really what was the most important part that stood out for everybody. Being on the other side of the language interpretation was interesting, and just hearing the difference between the languages and how the words and the concepts come across differently. And then also just hearing some of these concepts like land reparations that are really, really big and really challenging, and leaving wondering how to address those, and wanting to work toward doing that.
Yo también puedo dar poquito de nuestro grupo.
Gracias, Jen.
Thank you so much, Jen.
Gracias, Ana.
Sí, adelante.
Entonces, en nuestro grupo estábamos hablando un poquito de que nos gustó de tener el espacio y la oportunidad de
In our
hablar.
groups, we were talking about how impactful it was to have a space where people could share their stories, and especially have this space in a bilingual way.
Algo que hablamos todos en nuestro grupo es de la emoción de hoy.
We mainly talked about how emotional today was, and how it's sometimes difficult, how difficult it is to find solutions to such big problems, and But it's important to know that sometimes help isn't going to be easy. And there's a lot of obstacles that we have to face along the way before we can actually make some impactful change. And that's something that we talked a lot about in our group, and how just having the emotional aspect played a big role in finding these solutions. Thank you, Alan, for sharing.
Bienvenidos, bienvenidas. Gracias por regresar del descanso. Ahora para el siguiente discusión.
Welcome. Now we will continue for the next portion of the event. And now we want to focus on what is most important for us as a community. What is it that we can do to strengthen our resiliency in the face of these challenges presented by climate change for all of those who are in our community, particularly those who are most vulnerable to these impacts, and to those people that you represent or that you work most closely to. How can we figure out what we need to elevate in the planning processes and the agendas held by nonprofit organizations and agencies and networks that are participating with us today? So now we will invite you all to be in your breakout groups once more with your facilitator. And you'll have your boat with a captain, and they will share instructions, and you will take notes. Each person in the group will be able to add notes to the Google Doc if you feel comfortable. Please take a moment right now to reflect in silence on the following questions. What must be done but might be missed to build a just climate resilience with the communities you work with and represent? What do we have to pay attention to? What are your best ideas for enhancing resiliency and addressing vulnerabilities? Are there ideas you heard about in this morning or other ideas that you hold as well? Also, what type of investments or what are you willing to do to engage in the community? And what kind of support do you need in terms of resources, particularly when talking about under-resourced and marginalized and most impacted communities? These questions are in the notes in the document if you want to review them. You can each add a +1 to, or just a 1 to the ideas in your group that you feel are the most important or that resonate and that you feel most deeply in your heart. We ask that you leave a few minutes at the end of your 25-minute session to choose as a group the idea that you all agree is the best that you want to share. Now, Iris is going to invite you again into to join your group for 25 minutes. Please note your group number and click on the link in the Google Doc with your group number on it. Okay? So you'll have 25 minutes in this group. Thank you.
Bienvenidas, bienvenidos de regreso. Welcome back.
Welcome back, everyone.
Just wanted to make sure you turn your translation on. Por favor, dense tu traducción, tu interpretación. Ahora que estamos regresando al cuarto grande. Les voy a dar un minuto para hacer eso.
I'm going to give you guys one more minute to do that.
Ahora queremos tomar 5 minutos para que compartan lo que hablaron ahorita.
Let's take 5 minutes to share what you guys discussed in your breakout rooms, whoever wants to go first. What's one main idea you guys discussed?
I can share for our group. We were group 5. There were a lot of good ideas shared in this group, but the thing that we kept coming back around to was food security and food sovereignty as a basic human right and a really pressing need for a lot of people in our county, right up there with housing as a human right. And it was hard to decide which one to elevate, but we talked a lot about food and ways to expand access to opportunities to grow your own food and to for indigenous communities to have access to traditional foods and foods that are culturally important.
Gracias, Carrie. ¿Alguien más quiere compartir?
Does anyone else want to share what they discussed in their groups?
I can share out for group 3. We had also a few ideas, but I think the one that we talked about the most was what Marcus spoke to, which is having conversations about who owns land and nonprofits that own land, and how to start that conversation about returning land to indigenous stewardship, but also about where the funding comes from to conserve those lands and what conservation means and who it's conserved for, and what we can do possibly around where the money comes from and put stipulations on that to make sure that the indigenous communities are brought back into the conversation when those decisions are being made.
Gracias, Jen.
Thank you, Jen. Anyone else?
I could share what was discussed in group 6. We spent a lot of time talking about community engagement within planning. And so this is planning process. So this could include general plans, climate action plans, public health plans, emergency plans, and really making space for incorporating community voices, community experiences into the way our communities are shaped, and that really helping inform what community resiliency looks like in individual communities. But I think that there's a lot of ways to do community engagement, and oftentimes it's not done in a culturally competent way. And so really rethinking what that community engagement looks like to be as accessible as possible for participation of especially like frontline communities.
Gracias, Lucía. Tenemos tiempo para que un grupo más comparta, quizás del grupo.
We have time for one more group.
Sí, yo puedo compartir. Somos grupo número 2.
We were group number 2. One idea that came out was funding. I know it's sometimes a difficult topic to discuss, but many communities are underfunded, and we want to focus more on investing on our frontline communities. And in order to create resistance and resilience, it starts with funding. And that definitely does start with creating more spaces like this and having more community members give their opinion and give their experiences. And these people that share their stories, they are giving their work by taking time out of their day to discuss in webinars like this.
You know, queremos trabajar contigo,
Some issues that people run into is that there's not enough interpreters to translate. And our group definitely discussed a lot, but we always came back to the idea of funding. And change is definitely going to start with investing into these communities. It's important not to just tokenize the people that come and speak, but also get them involved in creating lasting solutions.
Después de que acabamos
Thank
hoy,
you so much to everyone that shared. After this is over, definitely take time to look over the Google Doc and look at the notes and what everyone else wrote. There's a lot of inspiration and a lot of collective inspiration. So let's take these ideas and keep working and create lasting solutions.
Van a estar ahí en la matriz de oportunidad que va a estar disponible en español e inglés en las semanas que vienen. Les dejaremos saber cómo y cuándo accesarlo cuando está lista.
These resources will definitely be there, and we'll keep you guys updated on these resources, and just keep checking. And we are part of climate resistance. Sometimes we make the distinction of climate change and us, but we are all a part of it, and we're all part of making a difference and creating justice and economic justice, environmental justice. It starts with us.
Personas de color que sabemos la importancia de la traducción, ¿verdad? Sabemos que la justicia de idioma es parte de cómo
language justice is definitely a part of creating intersectional change.
Recibimos mensajes, ¿verdad? De cuándo estamos bienvenidos y cuándo no. Así que nosotros como organizaciones
It's important to get everyone involved despite language barriers. And we are taking one step in the right direction to create this language justice and break down these barriers. I know when I was little and I was translating for my mom, I remember seeing how people would look at my mom and how they would look at her because she didn't know how to speak English. And I think this part of breaking these barriers is a part of respect. Jorge talked about how this country is all about respect, but sometimes some of the most vulnerable communities aren't receiving the respect that we so preach. So it's important to take time to make sure that we are including everyone and being as intersectional as possible with the work that we're doing going forward. We also have to make sure to talk about Black Lives Matter and also getting them involved into this conversation. I want to thank everyone so much, to everyone that talked and shared. It really touched my heart hearing all these stories. And we are so honored to have heard so many of these experiences and stories. I want to thank our translators, Naira and Maria. Thank you so much to everyone who listened. And you guys took the time and, to really find solutions based on these experiences and keeping these conversations going. Thank you, Chris from Healing Justice, for bringing us one of our speakers. Thank you, Mikot and the Chumash community. Yes, thank you so much to all of our organizations that played a role in today's event. And for giving so much of your time and your heart. Don't forget to take the survey that we are about to provide. And on the 4th page of the Google Doc, you can provide resources and notes. On September 29th, there's going to be another event focusing on the change of the street, originally named Indio Muerto, and how they're trying to create a change by changing the name of this street, because it's simply not politically correct and very disturbing for people of this community to have to see every day. So we're definitely going to keep working on making a safe space for everyone, and that starts with that street. That's one way that we can create change, and that event will be on September 29th. So if I forgot anything else, or if I forgot to thank anyone else, please feel free to interrupt me and let me know. But thank you so much to all of our orgs that helped out today.
Ana Rosa, and to everyone, I'm Sharon from the Community Environmental Council, and I just wanted a special thank you. Everybody unmute, and let's give Ana Rosa a big hand.
Mwah.
Mwah. A lot of work, girl. You did a beautiful job. Thank you. That was beautiful. Thank you.
Fue mi privilegio y mi honor estar con todos ustedes hoy. Gracias por el espacio y gracias por todo el trabajo que hace a la Red de Justicia Climática.
Gracias. Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.